Okay, in this lesson, we're going to talk about how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. Your essential question says to explain how to use the completing the square. So by the end of the lesson and practice, I want you to be able to describe it. Now in this box, I have given you the steps. And so it says when we have an equation, we want to move the c to the right. We want to divide everything by a if a is not equal to 1. We're going to take half of b and square it, add it to each side. We're going to factor it because now we've created a perfect square trinomial. And then we're going to be able to use the square root method to finish. So this completing the square actually has several different things intertwined within it. We've got some factoring, we've got some square root method, we have some inverse operations. So I know that all sounds really confusing. So let's just look at a regular trinomial, one that's not an equation, and let's talk about how we complete the square. Our goal is we're trying to make this trinomial a perfect square trinomial. So what we're going to do, get my notes, is we are going to take half of the b. The b value is 6, half of b is 3. Okay, that's step 3 in your box up above. We're then going to square it. Now if it were an equation, we would add that to both sides, but we just have a trinomial. So we're going to change our c value to 9. We have completed the square. So then our next step would be to factor it. Well, we talked about that perfect square trinomials. All we have to do is take the square roots of the first and last term, and then this will tell you what sign to put in the middle. We know it's a perfect square trinomial because we made it a perfect square trinomial. Okay? So that's all that's involved with completing the square. That would be steps 3, 4, and 5. Well, not step 4 technically, but 3 and 5 in the square above. Okay, so here's the next one. Let's practice completing the square. Take half of b, which is -4, square it, which would be +16. So our trinomial is x squared minus 8x plus 16. If we're then going to factor it, remember all we have to do is take the square roots, and this determines the sign. So it'd be x minus 4 squared. Okay, the last one, last example, a little bit trickier. Half of 5 is 2.5. Square it is going to be 6.25. We might need a little bit of assistance with our calculator on this. And then take the square roots to factor it. X plus 2.5 squared. Okay? Okay, so let's solve an equation now. So the first step is move the c to the right. Well, we already did that. The 24 would be the c value. Notice this is different than some of our other methods. We don't want it equal to 0. We're going to take half of the b, which is 5, and we're going to square it. So we now have x squared plus 10x plus 25. Now remember, equations are balanced. So if I add 25 to the left, I also have to add 25 to the right. Okay, so now my equation, I'm going to go ahead and add 24 and 49, but I'm going to factor my perfect square trinomial. So that's just going to end up being x plus 5 squared. So now step 6 says we can just use our square root method to finish solving. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to have to sneeze again. Okay, so we're going to take the square root. Remember, we take plus or minus the square root. So we have x plus 5 equals positive or negative 49. Whoops, that's not right. 7. My sneezes threw me off. Positive or negative 7 because the square root of 49 is 7. So now we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. And so now we have two possible solutions. We have that x is equal to positive 7 minus 5 and negative 7 minus 5. So that means that our solutions are 2 and negative 12. Okay? Let's look at number 2. First thing we should do is move our c to the right. So this time we are going to have to move our 15 to the other side. So now we have a squared minus 8a equals negative 15. So we're going to complete our square. We're going to take half of negative 8, negative 4, square it, will be positive 16. I'm going to add 16 to both sides. Okay, so on the right, that's going to give me positive 1. On the left, we're now going to factor it, step 5. So it's going to be a minus 4 squared. Now we're going to use our square root method. So we're going to take plus or minus the square root. So we have a minus 4 equals positive or negative 1. Add 4 to both sides. And so we have that a is equal to positive 1 plus 4 or negative 1 plus 4. So a equals 5 or 3. Okay. Oh, I numbered typo right there. That's number 3. Okay, let's look at number 3. We're going to move the c to the right. That's the first step. So we're going to add 14 to both sides. That gives me 2x squared minus 8x equals 14. Now, notice step 2, we haven't done yet. It says divide everything by a if a is not equal to 1. So we're going to, a is 2, so we're going to divide everything by 2. So now we have x squared minus 4x equals 7. Now we're going to complete our square. So half of negative 4 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. And we're going to add that to both sides. 7 plus 4 is 11. I'm going to factor my perfect square trinomial. Okay. We're going to take the square root, plus or minus the square root. And so we have x minus 2 is equal to positive or negative the square root of 11. 11 is not a perfect square, so we're definitely going to need our calculator to help us with this. So we're going to say that x is equal to the square root of 11 plus 2, and x is equal to negative the square root of 11 plus 2. Notice that negative sign is outside of the parentheses. And so when we calculate each one, we're going to get 5.32 and negative 1.32. I'm going to leave the last problem for you to try to do on your own.